Hello, everybody. My name is Deb Coviello of Illumination Partners, and I want to welcome you today to another episode or conversation of the Drop-In CEO Live Talk Media, where today I am joined by David Crysler. He is a business consultant helping business owners grow their business by finding and solving everyday problems. And David and I met on Clubhouse, another great networking platform. So, Dave, welcome to the conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Deb. Excited to participate with you and, kind of collaborate and share some knowledge to help people out there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This week's theme is about having difficult conversations with your team and various tips from both of us that have a lot of experience having those difficult conversations. But you know what? And we're going to talk a lot about it's hard. This is really a test of leadership to come to those points in your journey and pull out whatever those tools might be. Just a quick thing before we get going. So, Dave, weather today, what's it like for you in Michigan?
Well, it's a typical, gray, gloomy day today, but it is in the 60s, which is nice. And, spring is upon us. So I can't complain. I got my first round of golf in last weekend, so I'm feeling good.
Okay, golf, that's fantastic. I just finished up curling. Curling,
Oh,
yes, is an actual sport. You have to be a bit of an athlete. Our season came to an end, so I'll be picking up a little bit more walking and jogging and just spending some time outside and hopefully enjoying a similar spring. So just thank you. You
wow.
know, when I think about hard conversations, I just wrote an article this week on LinkedIn and my website that, being a leader, they just don't have a guide for you on how to have those conversations. I basically was developing the playbook or the guide while I was doing it. And I remember having three separate quality issues all at the same time. And unfortunately, as a leader, I had to roll up my sleeves, get everybody into the war room and say, stop everything. Stop everything that was strategically planned, meant to move the organization forward. And at the end of the day, yes, we got through all the crises, but it's really more about a leadership issue and how you help people navigate change. And I pulled out my compass point. I talk about the CEO's compass, the compass point of finding common ground and purpose, helping the people to maximize their performance, to address the quality issues, and leveraging their pride and their intellectual property. And ultimately, we got through it, but talk about it being so hard. So we have a million stories, but Dave, I'd love to open it up a little bit about your thoughts on this area, about how to have these hard conversations and any stories that you'd like to share.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of, I share the same sentiment, right? There is no guide for this stuff. This is not stuff that you learn in school, that you learn going to seminars. And it really does fall on leadership's shoulders. I mean, as I think back to kind of my career, one of my most favorite stories about having difficult conversations comes from one of the kind of young managers that we had on our team. And I say young because I was young at the time, but he was even younger. So I got to actually say that to somebody, which I always enjoyed. This was a guy who was in management, in leadership, and had been for some time. He actually, went to college and got a management degree. So we always kind of would look at him as, well, hey, haven't they taught you some of this stuff in school? And, as I think back to this story, what ended up happening was, he kind of came into the office and, as I tell the story was, white as a ghost. And it's like, Dave, I got this situation. We've got, these employees are complaining about this other employee and, some hygiene issues. And, I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. And, so as we talked through the situation and what was going on and the specifics of it, it really came down to being able to address the issue, number one, directly, right, which always kind of seems to be uncomfortable, especially when you're talking about something as personal as hygiene. But, being direct, sticking to the facts, and, approaching each one of those conversations with empathy. to understand that there's probably something else going on below the surface that's, really driving this thing that you're kind of seeing. We talk about symptoms a lot. You're seeing the symptoms of what the real problem is. And so kind of, long story short, the conversation went well. The problem was addressed and dealt with. People on the team, the rest of the team felt comfortable knowing that there was some resolution in place. But yeah, it just kind of, to me, it's a favorite story because it really illustrates the point that, there is no playbook. You really have to approach it kind of in a methodical way to be able to get some sort of an outcome and to move the ball forward. So.
Yeah, amazing story. And you get me thinking here about, first of all, it is challenging and you have to deal with the problem. And the longer you procrastinate, it deteriorates your leadership because others are watching that leadership. And if you ignore it or don't deal with it, then it reduces your credibility. And as a leader, credibility is one of the most important things that you need. And then you talk about, dealing with the challenge on two levels. You deal with it tactically because you identify, well, what is the expectation and what is the gap? And seeing if the individual actually recognizes the gap, but going a little bit deeper and understanding the human factors, there could be more, to your point, that we maybe need to deal with first, and then we can support them in addressing the gap. And you know what? I think people will probably respect you because you respected your humanity as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, as I think back and kind of, try to dissect all of the different things that, that you deal with from a leadership standpoint. And during my corporate career, I was involved with some, large businesses. So you had a lot of people on the team, you had a lot of differing perspectives and personalities and all of that. And, as I kind of think about all of that stuff, and you brought up about, kind of the human element, right? That the psyche behind all of it. And really for me, psychology, you kind of never think being a leader that you're going to be, a psychologist, and you have to really understand those types of things. But I think that's one of the things that, the further you go in leadership, and no matter how big or small your team is, even if you only have a couple of people, doing some development in that area so you can really empathize and understand where people are coming from. I've found personally that kind of really helps you from a leadership, kind of stay in that spot and lead, the team that you're leading.
You bring up some memories. I mean, I know we could probably talk on and on, but I have been in a situation where I think you've got maybe a similar story where a hard conversation was about, we have to potentially move or eliminate your job. I was part of two separate closings of plants myself. And I just know that, yes, it's hard, that initial shock, but then how you handle the human during the transition, giving them respect all along the way. Yes, it's sad that the chapter has to come to an end, but along the way, you gave them every opportunity to continue to leverage their expertise and treat them with humanity. But I hear you probably have a story or two in that area that was pretty challenging. I'm curious, how have you handled similar situations?
Yeah. As I think back, I one kind of, story pops up in my mind. And it was a facility that I was at for a couple of years. And unfortunately, we were, in a situation that we had to relocate that facility. And I kind of remember, the feelings that I had as I knew that I was going to be pulling a plant-wide meeting together and staring at, what ended up being over 100 people, in that meeting room and delivering that news. That facility was going to be moved, was going to be closed and going to be moved. And, and although that we gave people the opportunity to relocate, kind of me understanding that the majority of the people in that room had grown up in that, particular area. They had, families, extended families all in that area. That was going to be a big consideration of people, being open to that relocation. And I just kind of remember those feelings of, being nervous and just not knowing how the conversation was going to go. And, really feeling like, my gosh, here I am being the messenger, but this is something that, is ultra personal for all of the people in this room. And, and thankfully the conversation was received, I'm sure your experience as well. It's received how it's received. And it's about kind of that next, what happens next. To your point, it's that what happens next for that next, not just the next day, but the next several weeks. And as those things wind down, that I feel like can really make the difference in terms of a transition. I think that's the theme for me, is just recognizing that it's okay when you're a leader to not know or to not have the 100% answer. Right? Like, give yourself some grace and understand that you're a person too, and you've got, feelings that you're dealing with, and that you recognize, the impact of your message and your delivery is going to have on other people. I think that's important, give yourself some grace when you're in that position, because you have a tough job.
Yeah, you're right. Celebrate the fact that you are in that role and that you've been given or earned that
Yeah.
responsibility and that authority. Just know you've already won. And again, it's just a matter of learning how to manage these situations. But, going back to the beginning, you don't learn this in a course. I mean,
No.
we maybe have how to deal with change management, communicate the change. We get that in all of our training, whether it's Lean, Six Sigma, project management, what have you. But you know what? Once you get into business and as a practitioner, the emerging leaders in the organization just don't know who to turn to. And maybe the behavior is not modeled that they can learn from. And I also think about the senior leader, that they have to have their people cascade challenging conversations. And even if they know how to do it well, do they even have the bandwidth to help coach and mentor their people? I find sometimes that's even a bigger challenge, because people know they need the skills, but they don't know where to go or how
Yeah.
to get the support. So I guess what I would maybe just ask you, and then we're going to bring this to a close, is if we think about the person in business, you, somebody else many years ago, 10, 15 years ago, and you're having to be faced with these things of having that conversation. Any thoughts or tips, or do this first, do this second, or get your mindset in the right place just to set them up for a better outcome?
Yeah, I mean, two things kind of come to
Mhm.
mind. Number one, if you're the person that's going to be, delivering or having difficult
Yeah.
conversations, I like to say approach it, from the standpoint of being direct. You don't want to beat around the bush when you're going to have a difficult conversation. You want to be direct. You want to address the issue at hand. But you want to do that from you want to do that from an empathetic standpoint, because more than likely there is something below that. And you're dealing with people, right? At the end of this, it's always you're dealing with people. So you want to approach it from that standpoint. But being direct, I don't want to say being short, but you definitely don't want to drag these conversations out. Those are kind of my three tips. And the other thing that really comes to mind is, if you are going to have a difficult conversation and you're not quite sure, don't be afraid to ask a senior leader or somebody else on your team to role play a little bit, right? Let's just run through this conversation quickly so I can get it in my mind how I want to present the facts, how I want to, come across as empathetic, and ultimately so we can resolve whatever this difficult conversation is going to be.
All right, those are great tips, and I will tell you, I would role play in my head over and over again, and I'm sure people look at me strange as I'm like talking to myself. Whatever it will take just to get it clear in your mind what you want to say, because the
Yeah.
better you can say it and it rolls off your tongue, you can start looking at the other elements of the person's reaction, their body language, how they're feeling, and take that in as data. If you're still stumbling over your words, you can't take in the whole person and then deal with it with empathy. So this has been a fantastic conversation, David. I know, first of all, to everybody out there, Dave and I work in a similar space. We have a lot of technical experience and solve business problems, but we also seek to help people and give them the skills they need. So, Dave, if people wanted to connect with you, because again, there's a lot of people in the world that could definitely use our help, how could they connect with you? And are there any other resources you wanted to share?
Sure. Yeah, the easiest way is to reach out via our website, which is thechrysler.club. and that's spelled Crysler. We've got a bunch of different free resources available on our website. You can sign up for our email list, which we send out weekly tips and tools. We do different video series across our social channels. So any one of those ways would be perfect to connect with us.
Yeah, and thank you, Dave. And from my side, go to my website, dropinceo.com. I have several resources. I blog, I write all the time. And also, I offer the Drop In CEO podcast that's there as well for a lot of additional amazing industry leaders for their insights. And simply, Dave and I want to help you. So if you're somebody in business that just wants to talk to us and get some tips from us, reach out to us. And if you're a senior leader looking at this, no shame in thinking about, I just need some help. I just need a partner to guide either myself or my organization and have those challenging conversations. Reach out to Dave or reach out to myself. We'd love to love to work with you and hear from you. So Dave, thank you so much for an amazing conversation today.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. It was a pleasure. Looking forward to doing it again.
All right, be well.
You too.